Hello and welcome to another Comics Burst from the Full Force podcast, sponsored by Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, where we take an in-depth look at the newest G.I. Joe comics and related titles of the week, with me as your host, Chris, Up-to-Date McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80. Joining me on this episode is Brian, too busy to do this on the last show, Hickey. On this instalment of your absolutely favourite kind of burst, we continue with our catch-up with the latest issue of A Real American Hero. So without further ado, let's get stuck into this comics burst. The Cobra's Venom Part 4. Dr. Venom's destructive artificial intelligence campaign continues and nobody is safe. Not G.I. Joe and not Cobra. Can anyone stop his insane robotic rampage before it's too late? So, Paddy? Sorry, I'm so used to saying Paddy all the time. Brian, first off, how awful do you feel being called your other half's name? And secondly, what did you think about this one?
Well, do you know what? On the first one, people mistake me for Paddy all the time, and do you know what? I am happy to bask in his glory. Well, do you know what? I'm actually again loving this, and I know I say this every week, but these comics are brilliant, and you should be buying them.
Yeah,
this is we're straight in after where we left off on 258. Sightline's been hit bad. The Joes have come in and just completed a rescue of the team, and obviously turned down Dr. Mindbender's offer of assistance. So we're straight in, big panel. It's in the helicopter. It's in the Eagle Hawk or the Tomahawk. And things are not looking good for Sightline at the moment.
Yeah, they really push that aspect of like the kind of rescue thing, and the fact that they're on the clock and he looks like he's going to lose his leg and all this kind of stuff. And then that's something that I think is something that we've kind of missed in G.I. Joe for a long time, is that kind of very realistic like consequence of like after effects kind of scenario. And the way there was a TV show I used to watch called Pararescue, or Inside Pararescue, I think it was called, and it was basically about these special forces medics that would come in, like basically what Lifeline was in the modern era. They kind of made him into one of these pararescue kind of guys, but basically special forces guys who have to do this, like they go into intense combat situations, they pull guys out of the fire, they take them back to home base, but at the same time they're like providing cover fire, they're doing all sorts of insane things. They then have to provide medical care to whoever's injured on the helicopter, which can't be an easy thing, and from what I've seen on it isn't an easy thing at all. And so we kind of get an element of this in the opening of this book. We've got obviously, like you said, the Tomahawks come in, or the Eagle Hawk, it's picked the guys up, Sightline's in a bad way, and they're having to deal with him all the way back to home base. And there's this kind of real level of concern and worry throughout the whole team that Sightline, not only could he lose his leg, but then could be off the team because of it.
For sure. I mean, you've got on board the Tomahawk, you've got Bomb Strike doing her best to kind of keep Sightline, keep him calm, be positive. But then behind that, or beside that, you've got Roadblock and Lifeline having this conversation, which has really negative undertones for Sightline. Like they're basically saying he ain't gonna make it, or his leg definitely ain't gonna make it.
Yeah,
and even that's kind of carries on then with Big Ben and Duke kind of just reinforcing that look, this could be it for Sightline on the team. Do get to see Milo here at the bottom of page 2, and I just want to say that every time we see Milo in this each issue, he's getting older. This guy is like, he's old enough to be a member of the Joe team.
When we first saw him, he was about 6, and now he looks about 25. That's what war does to you. Yeah, that's what Cobra does to you. No, yeah, absolutely. And then so obviously we've got that kind of starts us off in this comic, like we're it's obviously going to be. I mean, it's going to be like dealing with the after effects of that battle that we had in the previous issues, and Cobra are doing that themselves. They're having to clean up, Springfield effectively, and Cobra Commander's talking with Mindbender, and they're trying to, basically they're having this conversation. Mindbender's saying or hinting at the fact that maybe they should have provided some sort of care for Sightline, which is very I don't know. I find that quite odd. Like, Mindbender's not one usually for having any kind of moral compass. So it's odd that all of a sudden, Destro always struck me as the guy that had a bit more honour about him. And that was always kind of like a weird dichotomy with him as a character. But to see Mindbender kind of having this kind of moral almost breakdown seems quite out of character for me. What about you?
I mean, I would agree with you on that. The only way I can kind of maybe retcon that is perhaps he's just like really, really grateful and thankful that the Joes got Venom out of his head, because, from what I can tell over this story arc, I mean, Venom and Mindbender were never on the same page. I mean, they were almost like arch nemesis to each other.
Yeah.
So finally getting him out of his head, I mean, Mindbender has Bombstrike and the team to thank for that. There's a bit of gratitude going there, but as Cobra Commander reminds us, nobody is really keeping score here at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So when we meet Mindbender again in the future, presumably it's going to be just back to all out war.
Yeah, we're flittering back and forth in this issue, which actually, it's not one that's full of action necessarily. There's a good bit of action with Destro and the Iron Grenadiers and Baroness and Revanche, but it's almost like the setup for the next kind of battle. It's the setup for the next situation involving Sightline. There's lots of kind of things lining up in this, and what I loved about this, I have to mention it now, is the influx of fringe characters being brought in. Again, I'm loving the fact that Larry is delving into the personnel pool. Is that a thing? And
yes.
he's like pulling out, like Muskrat, Dusty, Repeater, Leatherneck, CoverGirl. Now they're all being, utilised now, and that's really cool because, Dusty we've seen quite a lot in A Real American Hero. Muskrat to a degree, back in the day as well. Leatherneck obviously was when he was, in his prime, in the toy form, and CoverGirl does get some love in the comics, absolutely. But in terms of like, major characters, we're definitely seeing a lot of the bench being used, aren't we? And
it makes total sense that Larry would do that. I mean, we're looking at an organization here that's operating multiple missions simultaneously on a global scale.
Yeah,
that's what we're supposed to expect from G.I. Joe. So that you have, so it's natural that you're going to have these. It's not always going to be the same core team on every single mission. And Larry uses the personnel, the G.I. Joe lineup really, really well across the entire storyscape.
We also get another element of the map being kind of built that we're trying to do ourselves, Brian. Creating the G.I. Joe world map in a sense, and that's a place called Shazadar, which apparently is a sliver of a former emirate between Benzine and Trucial Abysmia. So now we're getting even more detail in where these troops are, and in this case now we have CoverGirl and we have Wild Bill dropping off CoverGirl, a number of other troops. It's got to be Dusty, Muskrat, Repeater, Leatherneck. They're all being kind of dropped off in this place called Shazadar, and CoverGirl is basically in charge. I love the fact that we keep getting Bombstrike is leading the team at Springfield. Yes. CoverGirl's now leading the team in Shazadar. I like the fact that that's being done. I just think it's a nice touch in all fairness, especially where the female characters really haven't been prominent for quite a while. They'd just be kind of like background characters almost. But I like the fact that we're getting I know we've had Scarlet in the lead as well in the past, but now we're getting a couple of team leaders here in CoverGirl and Bombstrike.
Yeah, I mean, I love how Larry's doing this. These are formidable characters on the Joe team, and it's great to see them, as you say, come to the fore. They're not just a bit of background character, or just kind of a token female. Like these are main characters, and Larry's putting them right in the thick of the action, putting them in jeopardy. There's a high, well, I don't want to say there's a high chance we're going to lose any of these kind of core characters, but certainly Larry builds a lot of drama around some of the kind of scenarios that he puts them in. And in fact, we'll be talking about how this particular scenario with CoverGirl ends up at the end of this comic.
Yeah, and again, we've got not shown but mentioned are three other Joes that have been dropped, kind of halo dropped into this place called Shazadar. So she mentions that Ripcord, Airborne and Heavy Duty did a halo drop into the outskirts of Shara City. And that's where they've found, or they've got the intel that it's heavily, guarded, heavily armored and fortified. But their mission, which is CoverGirl, Leatherneck, Muskrat, Dusty, and I believe Repeater does join the team. He's just not in it initially, or he's not pictured initially. They are basically tasked with saving these 3 UN relief workers, 3 female UN relief workers. So that's what the next mission is leading up to. And then meanwhile, we swing back to Destro, and basically he is attacking a Revanche facility with his Iron Grenadiers and the Baroness. And that's probably where like the most action is in this particular issue, isn't it?
It is, actually, this is one of my favourite sections in this comic. Baroness is coming in on the rooftop in New Jersey over the Revanche headquarters. She's been summoned there by Destro, and when she gets there, she asks, what's going on? These are your chief rivals in the arms market. Why are we here? And he informs her that it's a hostile takeover, and straight away the scene is set for. You're expecting that there's going to be some serious action. And literally, that's what we get. Next page, it's almost a full page, and you just see the Iron Grenadiers ripping the headquarters to pieces.
They look bad in this, don't they?
What a great figure. What a great character design. And to finally get to see these guys, we don't often get to see them in action. So getting to see them in this particular comic kicking is great.
Absolutely. So they basically tear up this Revanche facility and come out the other side alive, but they realise that this is just like a small cell, and obviously this is something smaller of a much bigger operation. What they don't realise is that it is a much, much bigger operation.
I love this where Destro is bringing Baroness up to speed, and he says, we've done simultaneous attacks at Revanche facilities in Switzerland, Olistan, Dublin,
nice,
Sierra Gordo, Darklonia, and Trucial Abysmia.
I like that they couldn't make up an Irish place; they just had to use one.
The Lucky Charms facility in Dublin. Once they stay out of potato factories, we'll be okay.
Oh my goodness, that's genius. Yeah, so obviously we can add Dublin to the map. How excited are you to add Dublin to the world map?
I just feel that we finally made it. We have finally made it as a nation.
You've got a Revanche facility. That sucks. So yeah, so we swing back to the pit in Utah, and it's basically Duke and Lifeline and Claire, who is obviously connected to Duke, and then basically it's the conversation between Duke and Lifeline and the doctors about Sightline, and they have to amputate his leg. It's it's that simple.
Yeah.
And then it kind of finishes that phase with Duke and Claire kind of embraced, kind of like very feeling awful about the whole situation, really.
It's kind of a tender moment in the story. I mean, Duke really does care about his team, and that's what they're trying to get across here. He's not just a field commander. These people are more than just kind of colleagues. He really feels for them. So he appreciates that Sightline. That's, for Sightline not being able to be on the team and post-operation, he knows it's going to be crushing news to deliver that.
Yeah.
But that kind of does lead into our next little part of the story, which Larry has kind of added in here.
Love this. It's such a like minor thing, but I love the fact we've got, again, Law, Tunnel Rat, Airtight, Order. We've got and I said Order as a separate thing to Law, but I love the fact that we've got, again, fringe characters being utilised on what is effectively, you've got the military police, you've got explosive ordnance disposal, and you've got hostile environment. And it just makes so much sense that these three are sent to the post office to check a mysterious package which is addressed to the G.I. Joe team somewhere in Utah. I love that.
Oh, I know, yeah, that is super. And of course, all three of them kind of take a moment to sort of investigate the package using each of their different sort of skills. I think it's Tunnel Rat is the guy who gets to, okay, well, let's clear the building. Law and Order can't find anything. Airtight can't sense anything, so let's clear the building. I'm going to see what I can do. And before we find out what Tunnel Rat does, we cut back to CoverGirl and the guys closing in on their target.
This is really nice. I love this kind of like, it's almost like an ore striker, but not an ore striker. I think it's actually modelled on an actual real kind of sand buggy type vehicle, not necessarily something G.I. Joe related. but I'll have to double check on that because I can't. To me, it looks like a very, very super updated, modified Ore Striker.
Yeah, it definitely, if it's supposed to be the All Striker, then the artist has taken a few liberties with that. But I would guess it's probably modelled on an actual military type of kind of dune buggy.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got is that like a Humvee that the rest of the team are in?
It's like a Humvee mixed with an APC, isn't it? It's really weird.
It's not quite a Humvee, but it has that kind of feel, yeah, like for a big personnel carrier.
I did actually have a quick run through of all the vehicles before we did this, and I couldn't find anything that really resembled either of them, like exactly. And I just, but I do love the fact that, you know, that this is possibly an upgrade or a different type of that kind of, you know, was it all-weather environment kind of vehicle, just like the Ore Striker.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that we're getting some realistic aspects brought into it. Again, possible missed opportunity for vehicles that haven't been utilised, I would say.
Look, who wouldn't love to see the classic APC, used in these comics? It would be fantastic. But, you know, I kind of get there's a little bit of, in this particular story here, it seems there's a little bit of real world military aspect to some of the settings in this. So using vehicles that kind of look like, you know, actual military vehicles rather than toys. I mean, I get that it works. But from a nostalgia point of view, I would have loved to have seen an APC, and if it was painted up in the Z-Force colours, that would have been crazy. I'd be ecstatic. Probably the only person who would actually care about that.
In the kind of Ore Striker style vehicle, there are shades of the Crossfire, which is another kind of remote-controlled vehicle in the G.I. Joe toy line. You know, obviously there are elements that don't look anything like the Crossfire in it, but it's more that kind of shape, that kind of... it's got more of a shape to, you know, in reminiscent of that than it does the Ore Striker. It's almost like a kind of hybrid of the two, which again is, you know, it's cool. I'm all for seeing new vehicles in the line. But what I think I would have preferred in this particular scenario, I'd have loved to have seen the Desert Fox, the 6-wheel drive Desert Fox. I'd have loved to have seen that utilised. Again, like there are so many vehicles in the G.I. Joe roster that you could get away with anything really in there. But anyway, so they're basically heading to, I think it's Shara City, and they see structures up ahead. One of them mentions that it's perfect for an ambush. I think it's CoverGirl, and lo and behold, there's going to be an ambush because there are so many people camped out on roofs with weapons, guns, RPGs, and the Joe team are basically heading towards that.
CoverGirl as leader should know and expect where the ambushes are going to come from, and so she's calling it now for the team. Got to watch out, guys. This is an ambush. I can't wait to see the firefight next issue that's going to ensue as they come crashing through here. Big time.
Once that's kind of established, and obviously the next issue is probably going to be delving straight into that, we go back to the pit, and we're dealing with a memory stick yet again. It's like Mainframe's favourite thing to deal with. Tunnel Rat, that's what they found basically. They found this memory stick. That was what was delivered, and what Tunnel Rat, Airtight and Law and Order sort of kind of found out. They pass it on to Mainframe, and when he hacks into it, they find this like super tech robotic prosthetic leg, and it's basically the schematics for it. And this is a present from Dr. Mindbender.
I actually love that. So this is Mindbender's way of kind of saying, thanks guys, you took care of me, I'm going to take care of you. And good news, possibly good news for Sightline.
I also think it's a strategically bad thing for Mindbender to do on the Cobra team, because you want as few G.I. Joe operatives as possible. You know, I get there's that aspect of, you know, feeling a debt of gratitude is deserved for Sightline here. But at the same time, obviously this is G.I. Joe in the Cobra world and whatever. This isn't real life. But the reality of things here just kind of really, I don't know, punches me in the face with it. Like, Mindbender is not, you know, he's done horrible things to people. With his work is effectively horrible work that he does. So I find it really weird. I find it a bit of a stretch that he would do this, and that's just from me reading it. I just think there's a real stretch, there's a real suspension of disbelief here.
I mean, again, the only way I can kind of rationale that the whole thing is that him being possessed by Venom must have been the most horrific thing that could have ever happened to him, and would be life-changing, because he's obviously aware. He's no control over his body, but he's aware of this alien presence in his head, and who that is. It's almost like that Being John Malkovich type movie.
Yeah.
And it's horrific for Mindbender. It's the type of thing that would actually change somebody's life and their outlook on life. So we actually might end up seeing a completely different Mindbender going forward.
I certainly hope there's something else with that, because it does seem like a little bit of a, why would he help G.I. Joe really, like in that situation? It's war effectively. Okay, so we move on from that. So Sightline, obviously, we might even see Sightline with a new prosthetic limb in the next issue. We're certainly going to see the battle, I'd imagine, with in Shazadar. But then also we get this small reveal at the end, and in somewhere deep underground. I know,
this is actually where it gets really exciting, and I'm looking forward to talking about the yearbook as well here. We get this back previously in this issue when Destro informs Baroness of the simultaneous attacks on all what he believes are all the revenge operations. Baroness says, well, are you sure we got everything? And Destro says, well, if we didn't, that would be really bad. And this is where it's revealed that they didn't get anywhere near all the revenge bases. And what we have is this underground cavern. We have one of these blue ninja droid BN387X.
I know, that's the only thing that bugs me about the when I'm reading comics, the last thing I want to do is have to concentrate on reading out, like in my head, the last thing I want to do is concentrate on what their names are, and it's just numbers and letters, isn't it?
It's a hard one to read, but I suppose, again, you're putting yourself in the mindset of droids. Essentially, the only way they identify each other is through their serial numbers, I guess.
Yeah.
Though you would think droids would have a way of kind of just scanning. They would be able to scan the droid coming, and it wouldn't have to announce who it actually is.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, not very confusing for the reader.
Yeah, I've scanned you. I know who you are, but the reader doesn't. Yeah, exactly. Obviously, it's a way to kind of start, characterizing these particular individual blue ninjas, and that's totally understandable. I get that from in terms. It's just really funny when you're reading it. I always have this issue where, as I'm reading through it, I tend to completely glaze over those kind of things, because I just think, well, I don't need that information in my head. And then later on, I'm like, I do need that information, because I don't know who it's referring to.
I normally see just BN and a whole bunch of numbers, and I just keep going.
Yeah.
And then like that, I have to go, oh God, who was that? Go back 3 pages. Is that the same guy? Of course, closing panel on this is a full page illustration of, and I have to go back to get the name here. It's Alpha 001 Prime.
Alpha 001 Prime. They've got all of the initial designations there, haven't they?
I love this sci-fi aspect to the story, and I love that he moved into the one-shots. We had them for a while, and then we had obviously the Cobra's Venom arc, but now he's gone back to doing what I think he does really, really well, which is having 3 or 4 different story arcs on the go at any one stage.
Yeah.
And we're getting a lot of setup here in this particular issue for events that are, major events that are going to take place post, from 260 onwards. So if anyone wanted to jump on, this is a great time to jump on the Real American Hero line, 259.
Absolutely.
Some great stuff happening here.
Absolutely.
And I love that we get a little preview of next month's cover. And we see CoverGirl and I think it's Repeater opening fire. So clearly there's going to be lots of action next month.
In the Cross Striker, which is what I'm calling it from now on. It's like the mixture of the Crossfire and the Ore Striker. Or the Ore Fire. Or Fire or Cross Striker. Either works in actual fact.
I am loving Cross Striker. That is great.
So in terms of a rating, Brian, what would you give issue 259?
Well, because Larry mentioned Dublin, my hometown in there,
17.
I'm going 7 potatoes.
That means I've got more Photoshop work to do, which is fine. I don't mind.
And I just want to comment on the John Royal cover. I've got the Variant B issue here. And while the John Royal cover has no connection to the story in the comic whatsoever, and it never does, by the way, the artwork is amazing. It's beautiful. Looks like I think it's CoverGirl and Chuckles in
it's like
some
Miami
sort of
Vice type thing, Magnum PI
Miami
kind
Vice,
of thing,
yeah. And the Fang helicopters coming in. It just looks superb.
There's a couple of covers I'd like to discuss on this one, actually. The Ron Joseph one, which is the one I have, is really good, and that is obviously directly representational of what's happening in the comic, and that's Destro and the Baroness just like destroying Revanche Blue Ninjas. But then the other one I want to talk about is a shout out to Jay Sullivan as well. Jamie Sullivan, who's been having a rough time of it just recently, kind of health-wise. So get well soon, Jay. But also, he was on. I managed to interview him some time ago now when we were talking about his amazing vehicle covers that he does for, that he did. He was doing loads at the time. He did the Ace and the Sky Striker from above, looking down at the Night Ravens. He had some his tanks and the X30 Conquest covers. He's done a brilliant retailer incentive cover, which has got Duke, and he mentioned this on the interview as well, Duke, Tunnel Rat and Scarlet flying off on jetpacks away from Extensive Enterprises, which is just blowing up from the bottom. There's a huge explosion going off. And it was funny when we spoke about it, because he said he'd never thought that they would sign off on it, because it looks like domestic terrorism is going on in the actual cover. But it's really cool, really dynamic, and it's a really cool cover. So big shout out to Jay on that one. Get well soon, buddy. We're hopefully we'll get you on the show again very really soon. He's just done an amazing wraparound cover as well, which has all the OG 13 characters on it with the base in the background and all the vehicles. It's brilliant. So, big shout out to Jamie Sullivan. I think for me on this particular issue, I'm going to give it 3.5. And that's only because it's one of those, I like it for a lot of different reasons, but it's not up there with some of the recent issues, I don't think. But it's what I do love about it, and what gives it most of its stars, most of its potatoes for me, is the use of the bench, is getting all those characters involved in loads of different scenarios. You're not staying in one place for too long. It's whipping around. I really enjoy that. And for an issue that has very little action, there's so much going on in it. And in actual fact, I've just talked myself into 4 stars. So it's getting a 4. It's getting a 4 potating for me. Okay, dude, thanks for jumping on and chatting A Real American Hero 259. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, dude. My pleasure.
We'll be back very, very soon. We'll probably be putting both episodes of this and the yearbook up back to back. So we'll be doing the yearbook very soon on that one, Brian. So keep it locked with the Full Force Comics Burst. That's it for this instalment of the Full Force Comics Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host Brian Hickey. See you next time, and as always, Full Force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/TheFullForce, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback, questions or just a troll. Look out for more of these comic bursts on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, our Facebook page, Twitter feed and YouTube channel from now on. Full Force. And a big shout out to our sponsors, Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, located at 601 Business Loop 70 West Suite 263, located in the Parkade Center, Columbia, Missouri. You can visit their website at distantplanetcomics.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/distantplanetcomics.